Greetings, Adobe Illustrator fans. In this demonstration, I'm going to go over swatches, working with the swatch panel, how do you access the swatch panel, showing and hiding different swatch groups, selecting swatches from books or other provided default swatch groups, how do you save your own swatches once you've mixed them, and creating your own swatch groups for later use. Let's start by taking a look at this icon that's been created on the artboard. And if we click on it, we can see that this particular brown and this particular blue, although a transparency of that particular blue is being used. And if we look at the swatch panel, which can be brought up in two different ways, either clicking on the swatches icon, if it's available for you from your floating panels over here, or under Window and Swatches. And you can see that the item that's selected on the artboard corresponds to the swatch that is selected, which is actually coming from one of our color books, the Pantone Matching System color book. And I can tell that it is different from the other swatches because it has this little white triangle with a black dot in it. So as I select items on the artboard, it shows me which swatch is being used. So that's kind of a cool thing to note, that relationship right off the bat, that there's a relationship between the items on the artboard and the swatches that are being used. How do you change swatches? Well, you can do that in a variety of ways. One is just to simply click on a swatch and change the color. You can do that with the default swatches here, or you can bring up different swatch books. I can bring up different swatch libraries using my swatch libraries menu if I don't like the default swatches that are provided here. What if I wanted to work in earth tones? I can bring up that swatch library. It brings up a lot of different earth tone combinations, which if I click and drag here, you can see these earth tone color groups are provided in this swatch library. Their color groups are noted by this folder icon. If I click on the folder, it selects all of the swatches in that color group, and it also appends them. That color group is also added then to my swatch panel library here. Let me just click and drag and bring the swatch panel off by itself. I'm just going to shove that back into the floating panels area just so we can focus on it. So these are color groups, and they are grouped together by showing us that they're grouped together with this little folder icon, which is also shown here. Now, if I wanted to create or add my own swatches, let's say I'm working on something else. I have another item here, and I want to make it just a little bit different color, and I want to actually custom mix this color. Let's say I'm using my color picker. Now, the color picker also allows me to view the color swatches here, but it lets me return to color models and mix my own new color. I can make things less saturated, and so I'm mixing the color on the top here is the color that is being mixed. And when I create something that I kind of like, that I'm sort of happy with, that seems to go well with the original brown color, then I can click OK. Now, I have this color here, but what if I want the item that is selected on the artboard, what if I wanted to save that swatch? Well, I certainly could using my swatches panel. In the drop-down menu, I can select New Swatch. It brings up the New Swatch dialog box that is related to the color that I have just mixed. I am working in CMYK color mode, and so I can choose how to name the swatch, and sometimes it's helpful for me to know the exact percentages of the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black inks used to make that color. But I can choose different color types. I could choose a spot color and make this a spot color, which can be helpful when communicating or setting a very specific color. Although I've noticed that a lot of printers now, digital press, they're going more and more to working with process color. So I'm finding that it's becoming extremely handy to know what the percentages of those cyan, magenta, yellow, and black ink percentages. So I'm going to leave this color type set to process color and go ahead and leave that swatch name related to those percentages shown here. And it's as close as possible. If I wanted to make them exact, I can just double click and make that a very exact percentage if I wanted to, by double clicking and changing those percentages so they're to their nearest closest round number. And I click OK. Watch what happens. It adds that new swatch to my swatch panel. And I can continue to mix colors. Let's say I wanted to do this whole kind of green sea foam theme. And I start mixing more sea foamy colors. Click OK. Using the drop-down menu, new swatch. I'm going to keep that same process color. Maybe I want to make it to the nearest round number, just to make it easier for me later. Click OK. And now it appends that new swatch. And I'm going to maybe create another. Maybe it's a little lighter, but it's still kind of in that same sea foamy scheme that I've got going. I could make it less saturated. Click OK. Go under here, new swatch. Keep that process color and the process color name. Again, maybe making these more round numbers easier to access later. Easier to communicate to printers later. Click OK. So I have these 3 new seafoam green kind of swatches, and I can create my own color group. I'm going to click off. I'm not going to select this item anymore. But what I do want to select and I create this new color group is I'm going to hold the Shift key down and keep selecting the new swatches that I have made. If I click on the folder, I can create my own color group. It brings up this dialog box, the new color group, and I'm going to call it Seafoam. Click OK. And now it has created this new color group, Seafoam. I can choose an item on the artboard, and I can change the individual colors by clicking on my new color group. So it's very handy once I've created this color palette that I might want to use later, all within the Seafoam family of colors, which is kind of funny. I've now made this new color group. If I hover over it, it's called Seafoam. And here's this other color group that I selected earlier called Earth Tone 10, and that came from one of the default color books. I can access those here as well, those swatch libraries, using the Swatch Libraries menu. You can see that Earth Tone is selected, and that's why it's up here. I can change the way I view things in the swatch panels. If I go under Showing Swatch Kinds and I only want to see my color groups, I just got to check Show Color Groups. Now it's only showing the color groups, but it's not showing the swatches that I had, those Pantone colors that I had before. So if I want to go back up to Show All Swatches, I certainly can. And it's got those 2 that are included with the active document that's up. But there's a bunch of extra swatches here, and maybe they're confusing me, maybe they're annoying, maybe I just want to get rid of them. I don't have to see them all. Again, if I click and hold down my Shift key, and notice that carefully nothing is selected on the artboard because it would have actually changed the fill color to this weird pompadour pattern. If I Shift select a bunch of swatches on the panel and I want to get rid of them, I click on Delete Swatch, the little trash can icon. I can delete that swatch selection. I normally, as a habit, leave black and white, up available, and the null color, just to keep those. Those are kind of predominantly used and often used, so I just keep those up as good practice. If I wanted to create a new swatch, which is similar to the drop-down menu here, so let's go back to mixing colors again. Let's say I wanted to start an entirely new swatch action, and I start mixing something over here. I've got this nice purple color that I like, and I click OK. Now that is the fill color here, and it is also showing on the item that was selected on the artboard. And I can click on New Swatch icon, and it'll bring up that same dialog box. Click OK, and it appends that swatch to my swatches. So it's really easy and very, very handy for you to be able to mix your own swatches and then save your own color groups. Now let's talk a little bit about the Pantone colors. I want to introduce this to you as an option. So you know that there are various default libraries that you can access that Illustrator provides, and I encourage you to try and play with some of these different color libraries and see what comes up. They're always interesting to look at, and especially if you're at a loss or you don't know where to begin with something and you're trying to create a new palette, you're just kind of looking for something to sort of stimulate your brain. That's a good place to start. But if you wanted to work with a very specific color, so let's say that this icon here is specific to a logo, and the client is very particular about using these colors in all of corporate documents going forward. So let's remove this star item and just focus on these two colors that are being used in our swatch library. And the way that I got to these colors, they're related to color books known as PMS. No, it's not what you're thinking. It's instead Pantone Matching System. And those Pantone Matching System colors are a lot like working with painters. And you can choose from swatch books. And they have each of the Pantone Matching System colors spelled out for you. And they come in different varieties. They come in coated, as if you were going to print on coated paper. They come in uncoated. They also now show process color, meaning the mixtures, the process mixtures of those cyan, magenta, yellow, and black inks that printers use. And so it's a good place to start when discussing with clients a very specific color that they want to use or have been using, and they want consistency across the board in all of their corporate documents going forward. So one of the toolbooks that your printer has and that designers and developers also have in their library are these Pantone matching books. If I return to Illustrator and I want to bring up the Pantone matching book, and it's related to a swatch that I've seen not only in the swatch books but also the client has provided for me, I can bring that up in two ways. Now I'm going to close this out and I'm going to bring it up from scratch, and I can access that from using the swatch libraries menu here, color books, and let's say I'm going with the CMYK for printing on coated papers. So we're going to print a business card on a coated type of paper or cardstock. And it brings up this color book. Now all of these items are related to those color swatches that I can look at physically in the color book. And I can actually find a specific one. If you can't see this find field, make sure that show find field is selected. Now let's say that I know in another circumstance, this Pantone color is 2945 in the coded. I can actually type up 2495 in the find field and hit the return key and see what comes up. If it doesn't come up here, then I can try to find like a nearest equivalent. And I kind of look through and find something that looks similar to that blue color. I can also do test prints. We were looking for something that's for coated paper. And if it appends, notice as I click on it from this color book, it appends that Pantone swatch to my swatch library. If it's not exactly what I'm looking for, this one looks a little greener than this one, I can choose a different swatch. And this is something that you work with your printer and your client. Do some test prints and try to find the equivalent, and so that you know that the next items that you're printing are as close as possible to what that client is looking for. And I can always remove swatches that aren't going to work for me. So that's just a real brief synopsis of the Pantone matching system. And it just has to do with knowing how to find and access those color books, either from your control panel, swatch libraries, and color books. Also found here from your swatches, floating panel, color books, and then you scroll down to find your Pantone matching. So that's just a brief introduction to these swatches and how you mix your own swatches, how you create a new swatch in two places, and then create your own color groups. Also, changing the types of swatches that are shown in that swatch panel. Can be accessed here, and then all of the various libraries, both default provided by Illustrator, some that you could download. You can download them online and add libraries, or you can access color books like the Pantone matching system from this drop-down menu. And that concludes your brief introduction to swatches, the swatch panel, and the Pantone matching system.